1, 2, 3. Good morning. How are you? Good. We will be starting in 2 minutes, very soon. Hi.
Sound check.
Hello, everyone. Okay, sound check. We are fine. I'm very excited to kick off the notDEVCON now. And welcome to ITU. It's Istanbul Technical University, and we are very excited to host the Ethereum community in our university. I'm Ulaş, one of the members of ITU blockchain, and I want first introduce just a bit about ITU blockchain. We are the first and biggest university society focused on blockchain and Ethereum in Turkey, and we are trying to work as a global community to contribute all Turkey and all global communities around everywhere. And also I want to say welcome to Istanbul, and we are very also excited to host Devconnect and Ethereum community in Istanbul as all city. As you know, we worked too much to bring DevCon or Devconnect into Istanbul, but we have Devconnect now, and we also have notDEVCON. And it's a bit parallel that we are making notDEVCON, and we wanted to take DevCon and Ethereum community to Istanbul. And now it's time to keep this value continuously to discuss more of these values in our university and host all of you. And we work too much to contribute to the community in terms of development, education, and I think that all of the little works, all of the little contributions, all of the little gatherings we have been making for 5 years in ITU now makes a huge sense, and we see a real impact in the community and in our environment with lots of real projects inside the ecosystem. And we want that notDEVCON will be the table where we will be discussing all of the values we are trying to educate and teach about for years. And we also think that it's really important to discuss the core values of Ethereum to understand it well, then improve by the community and us. And I also want to thank you for the Ethereum Foundation team. I can see Skylar here. And it's really invaluable for us to see Ethereum community and Ethereum Foundation cares about ITU blockchain and all university societies around Turkey, because it means more than ITU blockchain. We are too many university clubs, societies and students here. And I also want to give a big thanks and applause for the Vitalik Buterin, who is the founder of Ethereum, and we are really excited to host him in ITU.
Okay, perfect. Okay, hello everyone. Good morning. All right. Yeah, okay, so hello everyone, and good to cool. Oh, I see, okay. Yeah, so good to see so many people here. So today what I wanted to talk about is just going back to some of the principles and values that make Ethereum what it is, and like why it's valuable, and also how those principles translate into some of the things that people who are actively building the Ethereum ecosystem are really thinking about, and I think it's important to continue thinking about today. So blockchains are a really valuable and just a really interesting kind of system, because they have these properties that I think are very unique, especially if you compare them to pretty much any kind of other technology that is being actively built and maintained over the last couple of decades, right? Blockchains are not controlled by any single individual. So Twitter controlled by a single individual, and a single individual can decide its name, can decide its policies, can decide to increase the cost of the API by a factor of like 10,000%. Blockchains are not controlled by a single corporation. So there's no single company that runs Bitcoin or runs Ethereum and has the ability to just change the rules at any time. Blockchains are not controlled by any single government. So not controlled by the US, not controlled by China, not controlled by Namibia. They're global systems that are intended to treat everyone around the world equally. And they're not controlled by any single political tribe, right? Blockchains are for everyone, including people that I disagree with. So I think this is something that's really valuable to remember and really valuable to think about, just because this is something that is true of so few other things that are being actively maintained for the last 10 years, right? Like centralized software that has been developed, like basically for the last decade, even for the last 2 decades, tends to follow this model where there is one server controlled by one company. Everything goes through that one server, everything goes through that one company, and it becomes this like central point of political power, and they end up changing their rules to increase their profits, to satisfy like, the political goals of different people for all kinds of different reasons. And this often happens at the expense of the system's users, right? Like when even this year, Twitter made the change from allowing anyone to read tweets to requiring you to be logged in and really like making the API much more expensive. Like that really ended up breaking a lot of applications that depended on Twitter, right? And so you cannot build around something like Twitter without just always having the risk that Twitter, the company, will just decide to flip a switch and make your entire business invalid. If you build on top of Facebook, then same thing, right? If you build on top of any centralized system, you're always vulnerable to the rules changing. If you use any kind of centralized system, you're always vulnerable to the rules of the system changing, the system deciding to exclude you. A lot of centralized systems just exclude many people around the world almost without thinking about it. So one recent example of this is if you want to be part of the community nodes, you need to sign up with a phone number, and the phone number needs to be from a, quote, trusted carrier. And I forget if it's still true now, but it was definitely true when I looked into this. They just arbitrarily decided that like one of the major carriers in India, like something like a few 100 million Indians, their phone carrier was not trusted, and so they could just not sign up for this, right? So a lot of these centralized systems, they just exclude entire large parts of the world because like they don't matter and the risk is not worth it, right? And blockchains are something that is global, or something that is open for anyone to read, open for anyone to use, and as an ecosystem should also be open for anyone to build inside. And these are properties of blockchains that I think are just really valuable to maintain and really valuable to build upon, just because like there isn't really any other tech sector that really is continuing to be international in the same way, right? There's a lot of splintering that's going on in the world over the last 5 or 10 years, and blockchains are one of the very few places where this is not happening. And so I think this is just something that is super important to keep in mind, and it's something that also really protects you as a user, right? Back. You know, as a user, if you are on a blockchain, any application that you create will not be shut down arbitrarily, right? You put an application on chain, that application stays on chain. Maybe like individual websites, like maybe Etherscan, decide to stop showing your application anymore, but it's still on chain, and you can just go to a different website. If being on a blockchain means your transaction will not be censored, even if an interface censors you, you can always switch to a different interface. You can always download your own node, run your own node, send the transaction by yourself, make your own interface with just HTML and JavaScript, share that with other people. Whenever someone excludes you in the Ethereum ecosystem, it's much easier to just go and route around that, because the thing that is not excluding you is the base layer. Being on the blockchain means the rules will not change on you at a moment's notice, and no one can just edit the database to steal or take away your money or your monkey, right? So, you know, if you have an NFT, you're keeping the NFT, it's yours. It doesn't depend on like some company's database to continue existing. And this makes it much easier to actually trust that a thing that you have actually will maintain its value. Now, these ideals do not just maintain themselves automatically, right? So this is a chart of the percent of MEV relays, which are a type of infrastructure that's involved in creating Ethereum blocks, that were censoring transactions, that were not allowing transactions from a few specific sources. And what we can see is the percent of relays that we're censoring went all the way up to about 75%. And fortunately, because of the way that blockchains are constructed, even if it's 75%, this just means that if you wanted to send one of these transactions, on average, you would just have to wait 4 blocks instead of waiting 1 block for it to be included. But even still, right, 75% is a little bit too high. And so there was a pretty concerted effort actually organized by the community, not organized by the Ethereum Foundation, not organized by any organization, just a big community effort and a lot of people really getting worried about this and pushing back. And the percent of blocks that were a censored transaction dropped from 75%, and now it's back down to about 30%, right? So maintaining the openness of blockchains is really something that often maintains this like very active community effort. Another thing that requires active community effort is preserving the system's decentralization, right? So here is a graph of different Ethereum clients, right? This is like different software implementations that implement the Ethereum protocol that different people use. And a type of decentralization that Ethereum really values is client diversity, having different portions of the network use different clients. Why does this matter? It matters because, one, it reduces the political power that any single developing team has, and two, it means that if one client has a bug, then that client breaking does not break the rest of the network. There are 2 types of clients in Ethereum. There are consensus clients, which manage the proof of stake part, and there are execution clients, which manage the EVM. On the consensus client side, the situation is actually quite good. No single client has more than 50%. On the execution client side, things are currently not great. Geth still has more than 80%, but there are ongoing opportunities to really try to improve this, right? So if you look at the situation 2 years ago, Prism was actually at more than 75%. And now it decreased and it's now down to about 42. So this is something that I think can be done and needs to be done on the execution client side as well. One useful thing to compare this to is web browsers, right? So web browsers are, I think, aside from Ethereum, probably the most successful example of one of these multi-client ecosystems, right? So who here uses Google Chrome? Who here uses Firefox? Who here uses Safari? Microsoft Edge. So we have different browsers, right? Now, a lot of those are actually all forks of Chromium, right? But Firefox is not. And you have these different browsers, and their different browsers are like actually creating their own implementation of the same specification, right? So you have a separation between the process for agreeing on the rules and writing the code that implements the rules. And because of this, this reduces the level of influence that any one company, whether it's Google or Microsoft or someone else, can have on the rules of the internet. Now, it's not perfect, right? One reason why it's not perfect is because forks of Chromium, which is pushed primarily by Google, have something like an 80% market share, right? But even still, Firefox also exists, and different forks of Chromium still are independently run things that are different, and so you do have this level of decentralization. If you do not have this, then you basically have an ecosystem where whoever writes the code can just choose what the rules are, and if they start having their own goals that are different from the goals of the wider community, then no one is really in a position to come in and replace them and be alternative developers. So trying really hard to make sure that that does not happen is one of the goals that the Ethereum community has, and a lot of progress has been made, but this is something where even more progress can be made as well. This is a geographic decentralization, right? So this is a map of Ethereum global node distribution. And you can see a lot of nodes in especially the East Coast US and that part of the East Coast US that really stretches all the way up to include Toronto and Canada. And then, you have Europe, Western Europe especially. And then you have a bunch of, you have some smaller other centers, right? So you have a bunch of nodes in Singapore, some scattered across East Asia, some in various other countries. The top 7, US, Germany, UK, France, the Netherlands, Singapore, Australia. would be amazing to see Turkey in the top 7 at some point soon. I think this is something that is absolutely in the power of any medium-sized country to do if you just organize your community and just have a really strong effort at making it easier for people to actually run Ethereum nodes. But this shows both the global dispersion of the Ethereum community, but also the Ethereum peer-to-peer network, right? So the more that this is distributed, the less the Ethereum network actually depends on any single one country, right? And if we want the Ethereum network to really continue to be this open and global thing that does not depend on what happens inside of any one particular country for its security, then improving the decentralization of this is also something that is a really important goal. So those are just like some simple examples, right? This is preserving the Ethereum network's ability to accept transactions from anyone, allow anyone to participate, minimize the extent to which it's controlled by one small group of people. These are things that really require a lot of active maintenance and a lot of active effort by the community. And the Ethereum community already has shown quite a lot of successes. But there's also like much more specific areas where we can look at. So let's look at, for example, account abstraction, right? So who here has heard of ERC-4337? Okay, amazing. ERC-4337 is a standard for account abstraction where the one-sentence summary is that if you have an account, instead of your account being controlled by a key, your account can be controlled by an EVM program, right? And that EVM program can implement whatever rules you want. You can have multiple keys, you can have a different signing algorithm, you can have a key where you can change the key, you can do all kinds of things. Account abstraction is super valuable for improving security because security is one of the really big challenges that I think really makes adoption of the Ethereum blockchain difficult for normal users, right? A lot of people, even if they have cryptocurrency, they're not using a blockchain. And a lot of the time, the reason why is because, well, the blockchain is not very friendly to use. There's two big reasons for this. One is scalability, the other is security, right? And I actually did the math at one point, and it turns out that like the amount of money that people lose to paying fees and the amount of money that people lose to getting hacked are like actually pretty similar, right? And so the two are, I think, to me, roughly equal problems, and it's really valuable to try to solve both of them. But it's valuable to solve security especially in a way that preserves decentralization, right? This is one of the things that I think is like super hard for the internet, and this is something where the traditional internet has really been failing at, right? So if we remember the internet 10 years ago, in a lot of ways, it was really much more open, right? It's something where for most websites, you can sign up anonymously. You don't need to log into accounts to do things. You can go see anything. You can go download anything. You could even write a script to go download things. And a lot of the internet more recently, like to sign up to something, you need to have a Google account, right? To even like look through like social media messages, you need to be logged in or you need to use some API that's super expensive. A lot of things like require you to like just either be logged in or have these extra proofs of some kind. And a lot of the time, the reason for this is basically security. It's like dealing with cyber attackers, people like just various other kinds of attackers, people trying to burn through your system's resources, people trying to do all kinds of bad things. But the solutions that people come up with by default are solutions that basically say, trust me, right? It's, this person is trusted because Google says that they are trusted. This person is trusted because they're from the US, which is a trusted country, and this other person is not trusted because they're from Namibia, which is not a trusted country, right? Like, this is the logic that a lot of these centralized systems often just have by default. And I think one of the things that Ethereum can do that is really valuable is try to create different forms of trust that are not centralizing in the same way and that can really reflect a much larger diversity of sources of information to try to determine like what transactions are and like what things are like good or what things are compatible with users' intent and users' wishes, and what things are not. So ERC-4337 is sometimes criticized for being complex. And there's a lot of people who propose alternatives to ERC-4337 that are much simpler. So the problem is, though, that simpler alternatives to ERC-4337 generally have hidden trust assumptions. So let's look at the details of ERC-4337, right? One of the ways in which ERC-4337 is complex is that every transaction has two phases. There is the verify and pay phase, and then there is the execution phase, right? So first, you have this entry point contract that calls every single account and makes sure that the account actually can pay. Then you have the phase where the entry point contract calls every single account and actually performs the operation. And you have a lot of this complexity to manage the safety of the verifying and paying mechanism. And so a lot of people wonder, well, why do you have to do this? A big reason why we have to do this is to ensure that what's called a public mempool is possible. What a public mempool means is you as a user can send transactions, and you send a transaction straight onto a public network. And then the transaction just automatically gets broadcasted, and then someone accepts it. You do not have to send your transaction to some trusted provider. A lot of these alternatives to ERC-4337 that are simpler, they depend on trusted providers. Now, why do they depend on trusted providers? Well, suppose that I send a transaction where that transaction looks like it pays the transaction fee, but first it does like 5 million gas of computation, it does a bunch of really complicated stuff, and then at the end, it turns out it doesn't actually pay the fee. Or it pays the fee at the beginning, but then at the end, it does a revert, and so the entire thing is invalid, right? In order to prevent the system from being broken to those types of transactions, basically, you will inevitably need to have a kind of traditional trust architecture, right? Basically, what that means is that you'd have to have trusted gateways, and those trusted gateways would have to trust users, and then if users start abusing the system, they're going to start demanding that users log in. They'll start checking, oh, what country does this user's IP come from? If their IP is a VPN, then that user is going to get blocked, and like doing the kinds of things that people do in the existing internet. And this ends up like basically destroying the openness of the system, right? And so really preserving the kind of extremely open, but at the same time secure approach that the existing mempool gives you, where you as a user can send a transaction, and everyone is willing to rebroadcast and include the transaction because they can just look at the transaction and they know that it's going to pay the fee, and so it's not trying to cheat the miner, and they can see that just by looking at what it is. And just by looking at like basic details of the transaction and of the account that sent it. ERC-437 is trying to replicate that basic property, but for account abstraction, right? So having security and preserving openness at the same time. And if you do not understand that this is your goal, then you're going to invent something which accidentally either forgets about security or forgets about openness as a goal, and you'll end up like basically really reducing the security of Ethereum from the point of, and reducing the openness of Ethereum from the point of view of its actual users. Openness and cross-layer 2 swaps. So who here has done a swap like between one layer to move assets from one layer 2 to another layer 2? So chances are you did this by using what, like some protocol, right? Could be like hop protocol, could be like, like one of those. There's a bunch of these like proprietary bridge protocols, and a lot of the time these bridge protocols depend on one central actor to be online to continue working. This is something that's like okay for now, but this is not something that we want to depend on in an ecosystem where users need to have the ability to just move from one layer 2 to another layer 2, just because you just have to do that to perform any basic operation. And so there are better alternatives. So this diagram is from the Uniswap X paper. This is a project that is being worked on by Uniswap people, basically an open standard for how users can submit orders that basically say, I have coins on Arbitrum, I want to trade them for these coins on Optimism, and I'm willing to pay fees. And other people can then come in and fill in that trade. Open protocol does not depend on any single centralized party, does not depend on any point of trust. To submit a trade, you do not have to choose who to trust, you do not have to be trusted, and the whole thing actually works in this completely open way. So, right, so open standards. So ERC 1271, extending signatures to the world where users can have account abstracted accounts. There are open standards for this. Some applications support them, some applications do not support them. Applications should support them. ERC 4337, account abstraction. ERC 6900, modular wallets. So that different people working on wallets can work on different pieces, and wallets can share code as much as possible. The more wallets share code, the less total code you have to write, and the more secure we can make the code that gets written. So if we work together as an ecosystem and if we follow standards, then we can have more security and better ease for wallet developers. ENS. A lot of applications use ENS. Other applications try to roll their own name system. Generally, rolling your own name system is bad. Use ENS. ERC 3668, CCIP, right? So this is a standard by which things like ENS can live on layer 2s in a way that still preserves decentralization. So this is another example of a standard, and it's something that's really powerful that you can build on top of. So lots of these standards exist, and there's a lot of these open things that you can build on. And so the thing that I would encourage people who are developers in the Ethereum ecosystem to think about is basically build tools, not empires, right? I think the standard dogma in a lot of startup world is you want to build an empire, right? It's you have Twitter, and you want to bring the entire world into Twitter, and you want to penalize by 100x accounts that contain links because you don't want people to link to the outside world, you want people to stay in Twitter. This style of thinking of trying to create your own ecosystem and trying to dominate is to me, the opposite of what Ethereum and what other blockchain ecosystems are trying to do, right? To me, the spirit that is going to succeed is the spirit where you think of what you're building as a tool, and you try to collaborate with both the standards that already exist and the standards that are being created today that will exist in the future, so that you can be a piece that other people can use at the same time as using other tools that other people are building in the community. And so this way we can have the network effects of a large ecosystem without having everything be under a large company. So this is something that where there's a large ecosystem of people that's working hard on building and implementing these things, right? So you have the roll-up improvement proposal ecosystem, a very recent RIPs to try to coordinate upgrades across different layer 2s. You have ERCs, some of the open standards that I mentioned, EIPs for changing the protocol rules of Ethereum itself, and this is something that's really important, especially as Ethereum goes through this rapid transition to switch to layer 2s, improve security, improve privacy, and improve scalability at the same time, right? And my big hope is that as we do all of these things, we still maintain and we don't lose the spirit that really has made the Ethereum be the blockchain that it is today. And so I hope that everyone here can remember that and continue to be a part of making that happen.
Thank you, Vitalik. Can I get a big round of applause for Ulaş and Vitalik again? Thank you for being here today. I am Dilara from ITU Blockchain, and I will be your MC for this morning. Now, with his speech, Future of Web3, from the Ethereum Foundation, can I invite to the stage Skylar Weaver? Skylar? He's there getting ready.
Good.
Okay, with your big round of applause, Skylar.
Cool. All right, you can hear me? Nice. Awesome, thank you, Gulistan. Thank you to the entire ITU blockchain team for organizing this awesome event. And yeah, for all the volunteers here. Organizing events is not easy. I'm somewhat familiar with it. And so congrats to you all. And let's do a big round of applause to all the organizing team who put this event on. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the future of crypto, the future of Web3. And yeah, next slide. And I'll introduce myself a little bit for, next slide, there we go. Introduce myself a little bit for those who don't know me. I'm Skylar. I work with the Ethereum Foundation, like Gulistan mentioned. And I'll share a little bit about how I entered this ecosystem because it might be relevant to some of you here. I found Bitcoin in 2013 when I was 18 in college, in university. And so I actually was like, just discovered on the side. Most people, there was no class about Bitcoin back then. There's still probably very few classes about blockchain in general now. Most people had a lot of doubt around it. And I actually found it because I wanted to buy fake IDs on the Silk Road, and you had to pay in Bitcoin. So I ended up discovering that. I ended up losing all of my crypto, my Bitcoin back then in Mt. Gox. Who knows what happened with Mt. Gox? Yeah, one of the first big exchanges that got hacked. So I learned my first lesson in not your keys, not your crypto. So definitely always remember that one. And then yeah, in 2016, I discovered Ethereum. I was a developer at that point. And after discovering Ethereum, I was fascinated even more. I went to DevCon 3 in Mexico as a volunteer, actually, along with Lane. Here's up in the front, also another volunteer. And yeah, that kind of like changed my perspective on Ethereum. Like, I went there kind of expecting to see talks around trading or things like this about investments, and that was none of it, right? People were talking about the future, like problems that existed in our world and how we can use Ethereum to solve them. And so I continued to participate in DevCon and Devconnect teams, and it all started from when I was a volunteer. So for those of you volunteering in these events and volunteering in other events around Devconnect Week, I think it's a really great way to get involved and stay active in the ecosystem. And yeah, next slide. So today I lead the team of the Devconnect team and the Devcon team as well. So Devconnect, I think you all are familiar with Devconnect, right? It's a week of many independent events happening around a city. The city we chose this year is the amazing city of Istanbul. Big round of applause for this beautiful city. Hope you all are planning to attend a lot of events this week. I think many of you have midterms, so that's a challenge, but maybe what you learn in some of these events might be worth more than what you learn in your midterms. I don't know. Don't tell your teachers I said that. So, and also DevCon is another team I work with, and we have, next slide, yeah, we have DevCon 7 coming to Southeast Asia next year. So we have 1 year before DevCon 7. The location is yet to be confirmed, yet to be announced. But if you're looking for a nice trip in November-ish of next year, this could be a nice destination. Next slide. But today we're not talking about DevCon or Devconnect. We're going to talk about the future of crypto. Actually, I forgot to take my comment. And actually, the title of the talk on the slides, I think, the agenda was Future of Web3. I prefer personally to call it crypto. I think Web3 has kind of received a lot of negative news, and I like the values of like crypto itself. Different than cryptography, different than cryptocurrency. Crypto is what I prefer to call the field myself. But next slide. We can talk a little bit about it from the perspective of Web3 also. But in order to do that, let's recap what is Web3, right? Like, when we can do this by starting with Web 1. So what was Web 1? Web 1 gave us the ability to read on the internet, right? So this was essentially in like the 1990s, early 2000s. We had the ability to look at websites and mostly just read. Like, we couldn't really interact much. This was before Facebook. This was before MySpace. It was a pretty stationary, non-interactive ability. Then after Web 1 came Web 2. where we could then read and write, right? So we could post on Facebook, we could post on MySpace, we could now interact with the web. And that brought a lot of interest, right? So I'd say today we are still in the Web 2 phase, right? All of Uber, all of the apps we use today are mainly Web 2 applications. And then now we're talking about Web 3. So what is Web 3? Web 3 is the ability to not just read, not just write, but also own, right? Now we have the ability to own digital assets, own things on the internet. And this is new with Web 3. Before this was not possible. And I think this is a big innovation, a big change. Next slide. I think that the change from Web 2 to Web 3 is much bigger than the change from Web 1 to Web 2, right? If you think about the ability to read and write, those are similar things, right? Like your ability to read and write on something is like the same domain. And I think it's a big change to be able to write all of a sudden on the internet, but it's not changing your mental model that much. You don't need to really rethink how you do something because it's just adding a really similar ability. But when you talk about owning, which we're talking about with Web 3, the ability to own on the internet, own digital things, is another category. It's different than just reading and writing. And this is like, it's talking about ownership, property rights, and things of like security around those ownerships, and that's a much bigger change. And for that, I would say that Web 3, this Web 3 innovation is a paradigm innovation, right? And so what's a paradigm innovation? A paradigm innovation refers to a significant shift or transformation in the fundamental framework or model of how things are understood or created or utilized within a particular field or industry, right? Basically, it's a massive change, right? It requires a change in your mental model, like how you think about things, how you model things in your brain needs to change when you encounter a paradigm innovation. And so examples of paradigm innovations are things like the printing press, the telephone. Right, when the telephone was invented, it probably took a while for people to recognize like what you could do with the telephone, right? And for it to reach adoption and for it to be understood by the masses. The transition from analog to digital technology is another paradigm innovation, a big shift. It changes the mental model. The introduction of the internet is another paradigm innovation. And I would say that combines both Web 1 and Web 2. Like, once those were here, that was a big shift for people. And smartphones is another paradigm innovation. And next. And so here I would say that Web 1 to Web 2 was more of an incremental innovation, right? It's cool. Facebook, MySpace came out. That made the internet a lot more useful. And that's what really pushed the internet to mass adoption. But I don't think it was a big innovation from Web 1 to Web 2. Web 2 to Web 3 is a paradigm innovation, right? Here we are changing the mental models. When you talk about reading or redefine, like when you talk about ownership, like redefining how you own something, it's a lot more difficult to understand, right? Like it's like more of a societal thing, right? Defining who owns what is kind of more required for all of society to change the way they think versus just you redefining how you read and write something, right? So like ownership, I think, is a much bigger innovation. It's a much bigger change. And for this, I'd say Web 3 is a much bigger paradigm innovation. Next. And so with paradigm innovations comes lots of doubt, right? You all seen it here, and we've seen it before, right? Paradigm innovations are hard to predict. So just based on your past experience, you might predict that something will happen or progress in the future, right? You have horses. In the future, you want to have faster horses. But most people weren't expecting the automobile to come around, right? You have post mail, the physical mail. You want faster mail. Most people weren't expecting email to come around. And so paradigm innovations kind of bring these changes where people have to rethink how they approach a certain domain, and it's hard for them to predict. There's also lots of doubt, right? So when email first came out, when the internet first came out, what did we see? We saw a lot of doubt. Like, why would we need computers? Like, they're big, they're slow, they're inefficient. I'm never going to have one of those in my home. Email is complex. Why can't I just write a letter and put a stamp on it and give it to somebody to deliver? You saw that a lot before. And we see this a lot now also with crypto, with Web3, right? People don't fully understand the benefits it brings. They're happy with their bank. They're happy with their fiat currency. They're happy with their Web2 services because, yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty. Uncertainty also is something, so like if you ask, like I encourage you to go back to your grandparents or your parents and ask them, what did they think about computers and the internet when it was first coming out, right? When it was first coming out, what did they say? Mine say that like, oh yeah, it was interesting, but there was no way we ever thought we were going to have one. My grandmother, I tried to teach her how to use the iPad, and she was just never going to learn it. Like there's certain people who have mental models, right? They're hard to change. And this is the next part. So it takes generations to adopt. So once you have a mental model for so long, it's difficult to change it, right? Like just like I mentioned, my grandmother, she was never going to learn the iPad. Like I tried as much as I could, and I think there's people who, once they're like, the mental models are difficult to change, which is why there's a huge opportunity with younger generations, right? People who are, it's why I'm much better at using the computer and my phone than my parents are. And people who are younger here are probably even better than me at that. And people who are younger than us are going to be much better at Web3 and crypto than all of us are, right? They're going to grow up with this stuff. They're going to be the ones that are saying, why do we have to go to a physical bank to write a check to send money? Like, that's insane. They're the ones that are going to say this, and probably some of us are going to be like, it's what we did for a while, so we're used to it. And so paradigm innovations bring a lot of doubt, uncertainty, and they take a long time to adopt. I really think they take generations because you need people who are willing, who don't have their mental models already set. And so, what's next? And so with every paradigm innovation, there are visionaries who see the future. And it doesn't need to be a visionary or like someone who's extremely intelligent or anything like this. It can be someone who just expects like, the future will not be the same as the past, right? I don't know what the future is going to hold, but I know it's not going to look anything like it does today. And like when you recognize that, you start to think about what are some things that are definitely going to change. And there will be more paradigm changes. I think Web3 is one of them. I think AI is another one. I think there's many more that will come that are hard to predict, but you should be open to these. And I think many of us are here because we see that there is a future, right? There is potential here with Web3, and yeah. So what does it take for us to get there? To like have like Web3 actually have the impact we want it to have? I think it depends on the person, and I've heard this once said before from a friend in Amsterdam. He says Ethereum is like a Rorschach test. So when you look at a Rorschach test, right, you see a bunch of different things. Depending on your background, depending on your perspective, you see something different in this test. And Ethereum is very similar. So depending on your situation, Ethereum will mean something different. So if you live in a place where people are deplatformed by the powerful, so like where people are getting censored off Twitter, where you don't have access to Web2 infrastructure or services, Ethereum provides a decentralized platform for social media and digital presence. When you live somewhere where like there's uncertain property rights guarantees, where you don't trust that your property rights are stored securely, or you don't trust that your government won't change your property rights, or you have property rights of digital items that you don't trust, Ethereum can be a place to store property rights securely. And in this sense, like this is basically what I imagine NFTs are, right? NFTs are basically digital property rights stored on the blockchain. And yeah, so I think this is one thing that people see. What's next? Identity systems, right? So if your identity system is lacking in a certain country, or you're unable to participate in the system because you're a refugee, Ethereum can be a platform for creating and owning identity without needing permission and without being censored. And ultimately, you have access. if your access to the global financial system is restricted, or if you live in a country where your existing financial system is not working that great, Ethereum can be a global financial system with its own digital banks, its own stable coins that's available to all with an internet connection. And so each person sees Ethereum like something different, depending on their backgrounds, depending on their situations. And I personally believe Ethereum can support all of these things, right? All of these things and probably more. And we need to continue improving it to get there. So Vitalik already mentioned some of these things, right? He talks about 4.3.7, some other improvements. But there's some things like at a high level that we need to do to improve Ethereum, to make it be the paradigm innovation and have the impact we want it to have. We need to make it cheaper. We need to make it better user experience, and we need to make it more private. So quickly, I'll talk about some high-level things that we're doing to make this happen. We're making Ethereum more affordable with rollups, right? So how many people here have heard of rollups before? A good amount. Cool. So we are scaling Ethereum with the layer 2. Probably Ethereum will only be more expensive in the future. And by that I mean Ethereum mainnet. Ethereum mainnet will be more expensive in the future. Where will most of us be doing our transactions? Most of the world will be doing our transactions, likely on rollups. And why is that? It's because rollups are cheaper, right? So when it costs maybe $3.67 to make a transaction, to make a swap on Ethereum, it might cost 4 cents to make it on Optimism. And that's not the only reason. It's because rollups also inherit the security and decentralization benefits of Ethereum. So they're not side chains. They're not their own layer 1. They're inheriting the benefits that Ethereum has, the security of it, the decentralization of it, while also being cheap. And so this is why we, as the Ethereum community, are extremely excited about rollups. And rollups will only become cheaper in the coming months because we're working on an upgrade called proto-dank sharding. Maybe some of you heard of 4844, which should come soon and make rollups even cheaper. So instead of just 4 cents, they might cost 0.0004 cents to make something. And this is how we hope to reach the masses, onboard the next billion, so that this paradigm innovation can actually be usable. Number 2, usability. So we need to improve Ethereum user experience. A couple of things we're working on to do this, one of which Vitalik also just mentioned, which was ERC 4337 around account abstraction. Basically, what this enables us to do is enables us to have better security, easier security, I should say. Right now, most people have had to save a seed phrase. How many people here have written down a seed phrase at one point in their lives, right? Like your 12 words here that you simultaneously, you cannot lose them, but you also really shouldn't share them very much because anyone who has access to those has access to your whole funds. So you're stuck in like this dilemma where you want to make copies of your seed phrase not to lose them, but you don't want to make too many copies of them because you can't share them. So you're like, what do I do? Smart contract wallets are coming to help us improve this, right? So they're giving us new ways to authenticate, maybe with biometrics. Some teams like Klav, which are from Turkey, are working on that. And other types are like social recovery wallets. So which is easier? Remembering this seed phrase, motor, still, practice, shiver, advice, room, country, mechanic, armor, brother, manage, Arctic. Don't forget it, but also don't share it with many people. Or choose 6 friends or family where you trust any 3 of them to recover your funds truthfully. And I think us as human beings are much better in these social situations than we are in these more like mathematical memorization situations. And so this is what we need to get to really onboard the masses so that we can have them custody their own funds so they're not dependent on centralized exchanges, and we really achieve the vision we hope to achieve with Ethereum. And number 3 is we simply need to make it more private, right? So many of us have heard of zero-knowledge proofs, and there's a lot of projects in the works to make Ethereum more private. I think this is something that, like personally I believe in a quote, that was by Julian Assange, which is we should have privacy for the weak and transparency for the powerful. And so projects like Proof of Innocence and privacy pools are iterations on Tornado Cash, which enable us to do this, right? So we can have privacy as like normal people, and that's by default. But if you're a powerful person, a government, or a big hacker, you should not have as much privacy as the average person. And with Proof of Innocence, you can choose your anonymity set, so you can choose who you want to give privacy to and who you don't. And so these are cool innovations that we're working on to make Ethereum more private, which I would say is the third step in really getting Ethereum to the place where it can be used by normal people, used by the masses, and have an impact. So what's next here? Okay, so ultimately, I think we are in the 1990s of the internet. If you think, like I think, that this is the next version of the internet, I would say that we are kind of like in 1995 or something. Like email was just coming out, and email was slow to be adopted. Many people thought it was inefficient, it was slow, it was complex, and all of that was true back then. And it took time for people to realize that email and the internet was powerful, and for people to adopt it. And I think this is where we are with Ethereum, with crypto. It will take some time to advance, but I like this quote here from 1995 from someone from Newsweek that says, "The truth is, no online database will replace your daily newspaper. No CD-ROM can take the place of a competent teacher, and no computer network will change the way government works." I would just say, don't be this guy doubting Ethereum in 2023.
Show me like how much time do I have left or something.
Next slide. And so, also, I want to say, like, I'm super excited to be here in Turkey. I think Turkey and all of you here have a lot of potential, right? I think the adoption, so I think there's a lot of potential, particularly here in Turkey, particularly in places that are similar to Turkey, right? Like, and why is this? I would say it's because adoption of paradigm innovations requires changes to the mental model, right? You need to change the way you think about things. And there are some mental models that I've noticed that my friends in these developed regions have that I think are flawed. They have these mental models that say, I can trust banks with my money, right? So far, they haven't really had any issues. Why should they have any doubt about that? They have these mental models that say, my government will always have my best interest in their mind. They have another one, I trust someone to manage my property rights on behalf of me, right? I haven't had any issues. Why should I need to have a system that's super censorship resistant? And maybe like another one is like, big company X would never censor me. They would never remove me. And I think if these mental models are already broken for some people, then realizing the value crypto brings is much easier. And I think there are places in the world, maybe Turkey is one of them, where these mental models are already broken. People already realize these aren't necessarily true. I think there's a few other places around the world, and I think this gives you a massive advantage to see something that other people in other places of the world are blind to. They don't understand it. And so I would say, and there's other examples of this happening in past too, other paradigm innovations, like data messaging versus SMS messaging, or like adoption of smartphones in Africa, which basically leapfrogged the adoption of computers. I think Turkey and the people here could be a leapfrog country, right? Like you recognize the advantages that crypto brings because some of these mental models are already broken in your minds, and you're able to see that there's values in crypto that other people can't see, and you're more ready to adopt and work on crypto. And so this is why I'm super excited to be here in Istanbul, in Turkey. This is why we as a community are excited to be here with Devconnect in Istanbul. I've traveled around to Adana. I'm still full from that trip. And Ankara also for 2 other meetups, and I've seen a lot of incredible, impressive university blockchain clubs for one, but people who recognize the potential of crypto. And so for this, we are super, super excited to be here. So I'll end with that and just say teşekkürler, and If you want to attend more events here, you can attend them here. Thank you. I don't think we have time for questions, right? Or what do we have? Yeah? Okay. Okay, so we have time for questions. If anyone has questions, I'd be happy to answer them. They could be like, where is Devconnect event X happening? And I could probably tell you that. Or more broad stuff about Ethereum. Cool. Yeah, I think so. All right, well, thank you so much. I'll see you around the week. Cool.
Says. Thank you, Skylar. We like your energy. Next, we will have Josef from Pondal. Hi, Josef.
Well, now it's on. Sorry for the interference. Awesome. Cool. So good morning, everybody. Well, it's not morning anymore, but I guess for most of you. So today I'm going to talk about cypherpunks and the crypto nativism. First of all, thank you for inviting me over to the ITU. I've heard a lot in the past several years about the community, the ITU blockchain group. I couldn't be more excited to be here. My name is Joseph. I did a few things in the ecosystem. I've been like an early meetup organizer, so I can definitely see like a lot of work that has been put into this, and it literally reminds me of one of the first ETCs at the university campus. So please keep on organizing these. So today I'm going to talk about, well, you guessed it, cypherpunks and crypto nativism or crypto natives. I guess first question. Who is in this ecosystem? Who came to the conference because the cypherpunk values? Can you raise your hands? There's not many of you, but I saw many people wearing the t-shirts, cypherpunk. It's like a nice buzzword, right? So today I want to talk about cypherpunks, the cypherpunk movement, and kind of touch on the things that Skylar opened with the paradigm shift. So these three gentlemen here, Timothy May, Eric Hughes, and John Gilmore from the Electronic Frontier Foundation, these three gentlemen are at the very beginning of the cypherpunk movement. Can we go to the next? So the origins of the cypherpunk movement are in the 1980s. And I picked the topic because I think it's really important, especially on like the academic ground, to talk about where the value set that we are kind of, promoting today, where it began, and like what's the time frame we are looking at. So as Skylar mentioned, like there is the paradigm shifts usually take generations. And here we are looking at the movement that was seeded in the 80s, like 30, 40 years ago, but today has like even more importance than ever. I mean, the importance of the movement is still increasing. So we essentially, the whole movement kind of like wraps around like several essays, let's say. So the first thing that kind of picked up was the Crypto Anarchist Manifesto by Timothy C. May in the 1988, which is like pretty short appeal to push for like certain values and like certain behavior related to the digital era. In 1992, the year quite a bit of us were born in, there was this team of like cyberpunks the term was like first used officially on a mailing list, and this was kind of this is often claimed to be the genesis moment of the cypherpunk movement. Then in 1993, another manifesto, the Cypherpunks Manifesto, was published by Eric Hughes, was the youngest gentleman out of the three. And I'm going to go and actually read some parts of these two manifestos later. But I want to stress, like, what happened in the 80s and the 90s, and what kind of like scoped out the urge to actually push for certain types of technologies is the reason why we are here. It motivated a lot of people to then go and build cryptocurrencies and like build the various systems around them. And even though it's like 2023, we are still here and still like quoting these gentlemen. And very likely for the foreseeable future, we still will do this. So can we go next? So let's start with the first piece from the Cypherpunks Manifesto, which touches on privacy. Privacy is necessary for an open society in the electronic age. Privacy is not secrecy. A private matter is something one doesn't want the whole world to know about, but a secret matter is something one doesn't want anybody to know. Privacy is the power to selectively reveal oneself to the world. Now you can judge for yourself, like, to what extent are we actually fulfilling this? Like, how deep in our values is like the privacy requirement in what we build? One could argue that cryptocurrencies as they exist today, they kind of lost most of it. Like, it would be hard to argue that the cryptocurrencies are actually private. To a lot of extent, and like with certain usage, they can be private, and I think there was even like the original idea or like the original assumption with Bitcoin, which like sooner or later kind of was disapproved by just the usage and by the fact that people were going to like centralized exchanges and would like reveal their identities, and even further through the like regulatory pushes that pushed these exchanges and these like service providers to reveal the identities upon request. But I also think it's important to stress that, and that's the reason why I picked this like very first phrase of the manifesto. I think it's like more important than ever that we as a community like push for privacy even with like our own regulators. I come from a country that has changed their like governments or regimes 5 times in the last century. It started as a monarchy in the beginning of the 20th century. In 14 years, in the first 14 years after the First World War, it turned into a republic, which only lasted 2 decades to be taken over by the Nazis and become like a Nazi protectorate. It took 2 years for the country to kind of reshape and start like a new like democratic movement, which was very, very early overtaken by the communists. And then the country basically like locked down for several decades into under the communist government, resulting in the Soviet invasion in 1968. And it took like several more decades for the country to again become a republic and become democratic. And you'll often hear advocates for kind of the transparency advocates saying like, hey, if you have nothing to hide, then you shouldn't be worried about your privacy. Like, it's fine if the government knows everything about you. And even though you may trust whoever is on the chair, whoever is the current ruler in a particular country today, it doesn't have to be the same person. Don't have to be the same people like 5 years later or like 10 years later. And all of this information that we are basically like providing will still sit somewhere in a database on a piece of paper or now digitally and can be misused eventually. And that's why I think like this is true more than ever. Can we go next? Another piece like coming actually a few years back into the Crypto Anarchy Manifesto. The technology for this revolution and it surely will be both a social and economic revolution. This is exactly what we are seeing now with cryptocurrencies and the globalization of the tools that we are using. Has existed in theory for the past decade, 1980s. Like now it has existed for like 40 years. The methods are based upon public key encryption, zero-knowledge interactive proof systems, and various software protocols for interaction, authentication, and verification. This is exactly the stack that we are still building, like after this many years. The moral from this, to me, is that it's kind of obvious, or like it was obvious to these people, but it just takes a long time to actually deliver these things. And there is yet another moral, which is if you as like individuals, as I assume mostly students or enthusiasts, have ideas today which seem far-fetched and seem to be kind of like too early, seem to be like not really based on kind of the you know, mass demand, it doesn't really mean these are ill-headed. It doesn't mean that like you're off. It can just be that, well, the rest of the world just like didn't pick it up yet. So what is this all about? Like what is the cyberpunk movement about for me? It's about, you know, individual privacy, and the good part of it, based on the crypto anarchy movement, is about just like breaking, let's say, monopolies, like breaking old structures, old power systems. So another quote from the Crypto Anarchy Manifesto: just as the technology of printing altered and reduced the power of medieval guilds and the social power structure, so too will cryptologic methods fundamentally alter the nature of corporations and of government interference in economic transactions. I think this is a powerful statement because it's so old, and I also believe that in this day and age, we are actually living through the phase of being fought from the old structures, the social power structures of today. And basically all of the fluff around crypto and DeFi, even though a lot of that is based on like just hype and speculation, I think fundamentally the core of it is still serving this particular purpose. It's a paradigm shift, just as Skylar mentioned. It's something that we are building to break a power structure that's like very often just like centralized with a few parties. But today the technologies actually allow us to like participate in these power structures a lot more. And you see this with DAOs, and you see this with like all of the governance systems that are being built around crypto. So enough about cypherpunks. Recently, in the past like 2 years, there is yet another term that emerged: the crypto natives, or like crypto. There has been an endless discussion around like what's crypto. Does crypto stand for like cryptography? Does it stand for cryptocurrencies? I mean, first of all, it stands for, it's just a prefix, right? It stands for something hidden, something maybe secret. And I think like a lot of people are trying to just like define what it actually is, because people are like naturally, you know, semantically using the term, but I don't think anybody actually has an answer, anybody has a definition. We are trying to like search for the definition at Pawn, and you can like read a whole bunch of the interviews with the people that we assume are crypto natives. So I would say it's just like few understand this, right? It's like too early to define the term, but you can participate in defining it. There's few things that can be said about like who are the crypto natives, who are the people like, you know, going to all these conferences and actually like using the technological stack, who don't really care about cypherpunks, right? Most of us like don't think about cypherpunks like on a daily basis. Like I don't. I usually just think about them whenever I'm preparing a presentation. So what can be said about crypto natives? So it's a group of people, it's a demographic that's bound around cryptocurrency usage. is the community around it. And I think the word usage is very important. It's not just the speculators, the people that would like sit on Bitcoin and say like hodl and like wait to get rich. I wouldn't say it's like even our community. It's also bound to using encryption in daily communication, and a lot of us are doing that. With like, using Signal or Telegram or like other means. But also it's a demographic that desires like fundamental changes in social structures. That exactly like the paradigm shift that in Web3 that Skylar was talking about. And most importantly, it's us. I think it's like the people sitting in this room, it's the students, it's the people building the technological stack. So before I just sum this up and finish, I just want to say don't buy the next thing at the face value. So I would actually say cypherpunks have lost. They have lost their generation. At the time when the cypherpunk movement was started, the three gentlemen I showed you earlier were 27, 37, and 41 years old. 30 years after, so these guys are basically boomers. They have lost within their own generations. It's the generation of boomers now sitting in the government, sitting in executive positions in the same banks, in the same financial institutions that are now constraining growth of crypto as an industry. But cypherpunks also succeeded because they caused this social change. They caused this like long-term change in people's mindset because they were able to express and encapsulate the necessity of using certain technological stack and using certain methods to free oneself. And that's basically it. This wasn't supposed to be like anything groundbreaking, just like making sure that people are aware of like where the roots of the ecosystem come from. And that was my whole pitch.
Thank you, Joseph. Would you like to have any questions that they might have? Okay, you're all good then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, in order to talk about the education of Web3, we will have Rob from Remix to the stage. Rob.
Hello. How do I switch the slide? Do I point to you to switch a slide or something? What about now?
Yeah.
Just change the slide?
You just need to say next, they will change.
Okay.
Okay? Unfortunately, we have...
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Well, next. Not that next. That's a nice slide, though. Wrong presentation. I like that presentation, though. Maybe it will be better. What is knowledge? Knowledge is about it's about not DEVCON. Not DEVCON is about learning like DEVCON paradigms in Turkish. Actually, how many people have trouble understanding me in English? Then you're not like my family. People who raise their hands are like my family, actually. Because I tend to ramble a little bit. So I guess you'll see more as my ramblings, my late night ramblings in case of Well, not this, but when the presentation comes up. Anyway, Remix is a IDE. So just in case you don't know, it's an IDE where people write these little programs that are actually called smart contracts that are usually not very smart and not very contractual. But they're little programs, and they send them to the blockchain, and they live there, and then you can interact with these programs and with things called dApps. So developing tools and applications, decentralized applications, dApps, is part of the process of using Remix, because you're writing this code in Remix. So you need something like an editor to, you know, make sure you don't put the wrong little squiggly thing there. And yeah, actually there was Mel Brooks in The 2,000-Year-Old Man said, like, the skull is the most important feature of my body because it stops me from writing the wrong checkout and lose money. And actually in Remix, you know, there's a lot of protections in there. Where am I going with this? I guess I could give a presentation without my slides. No, it's okay. I'm enjoying this, so I'm not complaining. Anyway, so in the context of this, like, yeah, everyone has to start learning how to program if you're going to be a programmer for somewhere. And people often start with Remix just because it's a tool with no setup. But just out of curiosity, like, how many people here are developers? And how many are not developers? And how many are like doctors or medical students, biologists, lawyers, or law? Good, there are a few of you. Political scientists? No? Artists? Good. Okay, so it's important to know that, like, often in these kind of conferences, like, the engineer is the king, and then, you know, like, my background is actually architecture, so it took a while to, like, get my footing here because so much of the language is technical. And in Remix, it's kind of nice because anyone has access to these technical tools, but we're just trying to make it so that, you know, even if you're not technical, you click something and you can see results. And that's kind of, at least it's reassuring. And that is part of Web3 education, is like giving introduction to people so that they click something and they see a result. And if they're technical, they can say, oh, I'm going to dig more into this part. And then they can click more and they can dig more into this part of the technical spec. But if they're not technical, just understanding what deploying to a blockchain means is pretty radical, just because something happens. And although maybe like in the future, deploying to the blockchain is just not that interesting, you know, but at the beginning it is. And we're at the beginning, so sometimes this technical education for non-technical people is pushes you outside your comfort zone into something slightly technical. Well, okay. I have the presentation another way, or I can just keep talking. I'll just keep talking. So, where was I? Yeah, right, so as a matter of fact, for you lawyers here, we have this, so in Remix there's all these plugins, so you can look at the code in different ways or look at different kinds of functionality. We had a plugin and we had a project about smart contracts that were good for lawyers. And these are written in a kind of legalese that then compiles down to Solidity. Solidity is the most kind of, it's like the monopoly of blockchain languages at the moment. And so this project takes legalese And you can write legal contracts that a judge could read, but then it compiles down to Solidity, and then you can deploy it to the blockchain and have your application, your dApp, interact with a legal smart contract. That's called Lexon, and the founder of Lexon is here. Yeah, so there's all these interesting projects that are kind of in and out of Remix. And actually, so there's education for devs and non-devs, and also advanced devs. And the whole process of bringing people into this Web3 world is kind of fascinating, because most people are like, I guess, learning on their own. And learning on their own means they're like if you're a non-dev, I guess you're just reading the news. And if you're a developer, like you're probably like trying to get a job or trying to understand what this world is about. And so, you know, you're gonna kind of go online and you're gonna read some Medium posts, or you're gonna maybe take an online class, and or you might even take a in-person class. And so then, or in the future, you're probably going to be taking industry-specific classes too. So like the language of this Web3 stuff is going to be also couched in the language of your industry. And that's why like projects like Lexon are interesting, but also there's going to be things like that for every industry. And and getting this kind of adoption is important to involve like more than just the technical people, because the decision makers, you know, in any organization are, you know, the developers or the technical staff have part of the decision-making power, but most of it are non-technical people. And so getting them to have some understanding of what this world's about is like really important. So, wow. So anyway, yeah, so it's great to like be able to give these kind of non-devs a like initiation into this world. But also, it's kind of interesting, like giving online classes. I gave a class at IT Blockchain a couple of years ago, just a lecture. And the hard thing about online classes, like you're given the class and you're sitting there rambling through your slide deck, click, 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 and saying like the words are coming out of your mouth and you're just flowing along, but there's no reaction. And so I think there's like students in those kind of contexts, especially if it's a lecture, tend not to ask any questions. And so then it's not really clear to me if they learned anything, or so the interaction feels very like I just spoke for an hour and I don't know if anyone got anything. And even in this context here, I'm in front of you guys, and if you don't ask any questions, I think you're probably gonna, my assumption is that you'll probably remember a little bit. And, but in a virtual setting, it's harder. I think I watch all these presentations and I immediately forget everything. So I'm a bad audience member for a virtual presentation. And somehow, like in giving online classes, it's like hard. The goal is to get some discussions going, and especially like going through code, because no one wants to admit they don't know something, or the class is way ahead and you can't get something to load on your machine, like it's step 1 and everyone else is step 6. Somehow or other, you have to make some noise to get some help, and it's important. Otherwise, it's just one of those presentations that get lost. So it's good to be the squeaky wheel. I don't know how you'd say that in Turkish, squeaky wheel, but if anyone can, the squeaky wheel gets the grease? No? There might be some, if you complain a lot, people will respond. I guess that's what I'm saying. And so, complain a lot, even here if you want. Well, I'm not going to complain, although maybe I should. Anyway,
I guess I could dance around like how yeah, okay. So, yes?
One question. You mentioned that people are learning how to program in Redis. But nowadays, like, the fastest way to learn things seems to be like, let's go to ChatGPT and ask it, help me do this, and guide you through it. Are you adding AI capabilities to Redis?
It's already in there. And I mean, Remix and all other tools are going to have to start incorporating more and more AI into them because it's such a great teaching aid or aid for like, what's this error mean? Or what's this block of code mean? Right now in Remix, oh! The cool thing now is that this is going to be, a clicker, that you've kind of heard the extemporaneous version without the slides. So now when you see the slides, I guess we can kind of whip through them, but maybe it'll offer a little bit more capacity to, I have no idea. Let's find out. So, how do we educate the world on Web3? But who's the world? Well, the world's devs and Web3 devs, Web2 devs, and non-devs, which is like really a weird way of looking at the world, but in these kind of conferences, that seems to be what it is. So, but maybe as also members of the world, like organizations and companies, and how much like of education of the world involves like educating large or small organizations. I kind of didn't put small because I thought maybe small companies would be like already Web3 companies or harder, like either they're going to stay, well, I don't know, maybe I was overthinking it. So large or small or organizations or companies. But they may be part of the keys to adoption by the society of the Web3 stuff. You know, it's kind of in contrast to cypherpunk or like being more individualist, like this is protection for me, but these are systems that could help all parts of society. And how are people learning now? Well, that's what I just went over. On their own, in person, in the news. And we went over that. And also there's like this problem of crypto blather, of like people use all these phrases all the time and people, you know, trustless, like, I don't want to trust something that's trustless. Like, why would you want to put money in something that's trustless? I mean, you can kind of parse it and make some sense out of it eventually, or maybe not. And so the point here is, well, actually the point here is that the crypto term list, which exists, it's a list of crypto terms, their definitions, and also how to translate these terms into different languages, which we'll go into a little bit more later on about translating Remix and also other tools. Yeah, and so it's also like there's the crypto vocabulary, but there's incorporating the crypto vocabulary into like an industry's vocabulary. And that's like really essential, but it also involves some kind of liaison with the industry to like understand how this world fits into their world, and then to teach, this is like really important for teaching people who are not devs about this Web3 world, is by adopting their vocabulary and the way their work processes with this Web3 work processes. And also, like, part of this education is going to have to involve certifications for Web3 work. And like, I'm a certified Ethereum engineer or something like that, or a certified Ethereum administrator, or I know there's all this sort of stuff. People are talking about it. Companies are starting up about it. It also could have lots of use. I'm not going to talk about that, but it also could have lots of use cases of like you get a certification, which gives you like a soul-bound NFT, so that you can. It's an NFT that says that like, you've accomplished something, And if you change addresses, you can still transfer it, but only to yourself or something like that. And so that you can show people that you actually are certified. Maybe this like kind of hooks into something like LinkedIn so that you show like your diploma there, but it's also an NFT, so it's crossing between different, you know, Web 2, Web 3, piece of paper. Also, like, who's too young for Web 3 education? We were talking about like teaching kids in high school, like, I mean, I guess it's part of financial literacy in a certain way, or upcoming financial literacy, but also, like, if I'm talking too fast, you know, stop me or slow me down or something. Sometimes I get worked up. And so this is like go back into how to get help. And it's kind of interesting, like, when you try to Google a lot of problems in, at least for Remix, you go to Google and you get to Stack Overflow. We don't really tend to monitor Stack Overflow that much. So you're getting answers. Anyway, then there's like our own Discord servers, which is probably the best way to ask questions about something in Remix. And then, of course, there's like scouring our documentation or other documentations. You know, and the way software seems to work is like the coders are coding madly at something. The documentation writers are not either speaking very closely with the coders, or there's a kind of lag between when documentation gets up to date. That's why, like, all this AI stuff is really great, because, you know, it can help you guide you through what's going on in the code and give you a lot of clues. And let's see what I got here. Oh, so now we're back to like Remix stuff. So because Remix is this online IDE, there's no setup. So it's often used like to get people going quickly. And it's a cool tool. At least I like to think so. And so it's like making it easy so it loads quickly. And I mean, it works out of the box. And making it tangible, so that means like you click and you see your response. And that's good for beginners, and it's good for introducing people to this concept. And also keeping it somewhat complicated, because it's complicated stuff. And it's for making smart contracts. Has a UI. Everyone learns with it. It's for, well, here, let's go into beginner devs. That's the click and see. Yeah, those are the 3 parts of beginner devs. Like, you got to get Solidity under control and learn some blockchain paradigms, learn about loops and limitations and stuff like that. Yeah, and so then Remix is great for checking out low-level stuff too. Oh no. Oh yeah, so there are these tutorials inside of Remix, which are nice because that's the learner tutorials. There are all these ones there. There's going to be more and more. But these are like, the cool thing about this world is like, these ones are, you load these repos into Remix. So these are our repo of tutorials, but other people could write these tutorials. And as well, I forget what I was going to say. But anyway, oh yeah. So they also refer to other sources outside of this tool. So it's kind of good, like you can play with the contracts inside of here. There's lessons like teaching you stuff, but then there's also other sources. So you have to get your information from lots of different sources. And this is like going through some of just the Solidity course. And they're kind of step-by-step stuff. So you can see the answer, you can do some work, check your answer, but it doesn't keep track of where you are. Like this is I mean, I don't know if anyone still uses crypto zombies anymore. Does anyone? Does anyone know about it? Yeah, it was like it's an amazing tool, but it's like hard to extend. It's very gamified learning Solidity. Remix isn't, the Learnith stuff isn't, but it means that it's easier to write, so it's easier to update, and people can write their own versions of it and load it into Remix. And then beginning devs like always need to read through code. So like Remix has a bunch of templates, and actually we just launched the semaphore template, a ZK with Circom ZK proof stuff. So that's kind of for a higher level, or for people who want to start looking into ZK proofs, there's some code there. You got to clone repos. You can do that easily in Remix. You can read through verified contracts. And then there's this kind of trick where you take the Etherscan URL and you put a Remix URL there, and it loads that contract into Remix. And then you go through code libraries like Cookbook. There's a plugin for that. And like in the debugger, you can see like the relationship between the opcodes and gas costs. And then there's getting help from videos and friends and AI and stuff. So we're working on a large language model in Remix. So it'll be hopefully like a co-pilot. So we'll see how that develops. Then there's an easy way of getting to the documentation, which is always important. And I'm kind of amazed, like, I think most people don't actually read the documentation. And the trick in all these tools is, like, we make all these features, but sometimes people don't know about the features. So that's a big quandary for us, about how to get the word out about our features. And so this is some of the ChatGPT stuff inside of Remix, where you can right-click on some code, and you can, if you right-click inside the function, it'll say explain this function, and then it'll print out what the function means, which is, you know, great for trying to understand what a lot of contracts are about. And then compiler errors too. Just like there's all these errors thrown at you all the time, and it takes a while to understand what they mean. And then to get help from a friend when you're working on your own, there's lots of ways you can like push it to. You can push a repo to GitHub, or you can like make a gist and then send them a URL over the gist, and then they could load that in Remix, or just load the gist and look at their gist, and they can check the code and give you a little help. And then like quick fixes, like I always had problems with the pragma statement in Solidity. I would always type it wrong. Now, if you just leave it out, like you'll get a quick fix prompts. These are the quick fix stuff, but they're just like silly errors. A lot of programming is just like taking care of the silly errors, and it's kind of boring to like look through this to find the silly errors. But these are this way of it'll just take care of it for you, as long as you click that little blue ball. And if you don't, you're stuck. And then getting the Remix UI and Remix documentation into Turkish or any other languages. Like right now, well, a lot of projects are like, kind of resist putting info in other languages. But I found that it's like really engages the user community. So I like it. And now Remix is in 4 languages. But it just could easily be in like hundreds, like Ethereum.org. Because they, I mean, how's the Ethereum.org in Turkish? Is it pretty good? Does anyone know? Good, good. So if you want to help on Remix translation, you can go to this. We use Crowdin, and you can sign up there for one's for the UI of Remix, and one's for the documentation, and we can start getting a Turkish language version of the Remix documentation, even Learnith tutorials, which are not in Crowdin, but they will be soon, and then, but also just UI and documentation. Yeah, I talked about that. And then I talked about making your own Learnith tutorial. So if you're teaching a class, and you're going to teach the same class over and over, it could be nice to use Learnith as your learning platform. And you know, there's other learning platforms out there. It doesn't like keep track of student work, and students can't like submit answers inside of Learnith to you. But you know, it's a good teaching tool. And so there's this other. Wait a minute. Oh yeah, this is like teaching famous hacks. Have you guys had that sort of class or lesson in anything? I think it's a bit like famous chess moves, but like you can You create some transactions, then you hit save here in the deploy and run, and then you get this JSON file of all your transactions. And so you can do like how a hacker stole some money, and then you can have the class like go through the steps of the procedure of how they stole the money. And you know, it's good to security audit in the class. Yeah, we've gone through that. And then for keeping experienced devs up to date, it's like now from going from click, 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 you know, all this GUI stuff inside Remix, there's also a lot of scripts. So it's important to go step by step as you're starting, and then to start incorporating scripts into your work as you get more and more advanced. And also there's this concept of like, you know, you code a bit, but you got to keep setting the state of your contract, and you can do that with the script really easily. So then you could like, there's a button called, where is it? There, compile and run. So then you compile the project, and it'll set the state of your project with a script. And so, yeah, it's this problem of like, how do you teach people about Remix? You know, we add more features. People are not really looking at the documentation, not looking at our release notes, although I'd be honored if you did because I write them. Anyway, so that's our kind of like challenge. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. And this is not your first time with IT blockchain, right?
This
But
what?
first, we had an event before, but online.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to have you in person here. Thank you for being here.
Thanks.
Let's give him a big round of applause. All right, next up, we have Joshua from DeSci World. With your applauses, Joshua, you can come to the stage.
Thanks. Don't leave. Okay. Cool. Oh. Okay, the formatting's a little bit strange here, so I don't know if that's going to play out on the rest of the presentation, but anyways. So this is a presentation on the concept of a knowledge-backed economy in an AI-driven future. That little robot down there is a representation of an AI. So my name is, oh, next. Can I use this? Great. So my name is Joshua Bate. I'm the founder of DeSci World. DeSci World is a decentralized platform for improving DeSci, and you can visit us at desci.world here. This is a brand new concept that we're releasing. This is actually the first time that I'm talking about it today, so I'm excited, and I hope you guys are too. We typically live in a society that has gone from this stage to this stage to this stage. The first stage here is the manufacturing and the goods-based economy. We produce goods, we produce cars, we produce steel, we produce chairs, we produce bottles, and our economy was driven by this. Around 40% of people for the last 100 years have been employed in the manufacturing of raw goods. Today in the US, around 5% of people are employed in the manufacturing industry. We move from manufacturing to the service-based economy. In the service-based economy, the majority of people are employed through things such as teachers, cleaners, cashiers, service workers. With AI and automation, manufacturing reduced. With improved AI and automation, services will also be reduced. This is because manufacturing and a lot of service industries are repetitive tasks with confined rules that can actually be done pretty efficiently by AI. The more powerful the AI becomes, the more efficient these processes become. And such, soon, cashiers, even lawyers, teachers will probably be done better through AI than through humans. So what's next for humanity? Is everybody going to lose their job and become unemployed? We hope not. So we're pushing this concept here of the knowledge-backed economy. What is knowledge? So knowledge, we're going to talk here about two separate definitions. The first one is the dictionary definition, and the second one is our cultural understanding of knowledge and of ideas. So the first one here is the dictionary definition of knowledge. Knowledge is the sum of what is known. This is the dictionary definition. This presents an opportunity to us as humans, because AI, as they work today, we are not at AGI, they synthesize and they process the information that is known. The information that humans have produced can be gathered by AI and processed in a very smart way. Humans, however, create the knowledge, and are currently the only ones that can create knowledge. In an AGI world, this might look different, but we're not quite there yet. So in this, the fact that knowledge is created by humans, it presents us a unique opportunity. And the second understanding of knowledge is that which is accepted. In the usual sense, we have an institution, such as a university, a regulatory body, or an expert group, and these groups decide what is knowledge, what becomes canon. Here you see in the red some ideas which are decided to be false or misinformation or unvalid data, and those which are green are attested by the institutions to be canonical knowledge. And this generally makes up everything that we consider to be true in society today. So we have the premise. We have the premise of what is knowledge. We go from goods to services to, hopefully, a knowledge-backed economy. But how do you make an economy full stop? You have to decide how to quantify and value the outputs of that economy. So in the goods and services, we can give a price to a chair or a bottle of water based on its inputs. In the service economy, we can give a price to your hourly wage or your service based on the inputs and the outputs and the value we prescribe to humans. But how do you value knowledge? This is a very difficult concept which we're trying to tackle at DeSci World. I'm going to present to you a few ideas and a few pieces of infrastructure as to how this might play out. It's actually what we're building at DeSci World right now. So typically, in today's society, when you value knowledge, there are two core ways to value it. We have the productive knowledge set, which is patented, copyrighted, IP'd. And typically through this system, we have lots of corporate commercial use cases for knowledge, for ideas, for science, such as cleaning products, or pharmaceuticals, or fertilizers, and other such things. Synthetic biology for new things recently, creating meat and such things. And in the middle here, in the news, very important, is weapons of war. This is how most science is actually dictated and created and funded, is through its eventual applications for practical use cases. In particular, the middle one there, war, is actually probably the biggest driver of innovation for the last 100 years. And the second way that we tend to value knowledge is through institutions. We have prizes and we have grants. An institution will determine an idea's value beforehand and give it a grant in order for it to be carried out. The researchers will receive grants from institutions based on their proposals. And retroactive funding through prizes, for example, the Nobel Prize, will also be given to scientists for their ideas. So here we have two core ways to value knowledge today, through the patenting system, through the productive knowledge system, and through the retroactive institutional grants and prize system. So this is an analogy for how we value knowledge today, and this is an analogy of why it's so flawed. Here in the middle, we have a sprout, a plant, and it's an idea that became a productive piece of knowledge. The scientist or the researcher or the thinker thought about it, researched it, and created something out of it. The creation here is the plant. So it's given a stamp of approval, and money is sent to the thinker, the researcher. He's rewarded for his contributions to this idea. However, in reality, the soil from which this plant is sprouting from is actually littered with the dead and dying ideas of other researchers and other scientists. Those that decided to try and research something that eventually became this plant didn't quite get there, didn't quite find the practical application, couldn't quite find that conclusion. Their ideas are what this eventual idea would be built upon. Without soil, without the dead and dying ideas of experimentation, of people who are making mistakes and trying new things, without this soil, you cannot grow the plants of knowledge. Without this soil, new ideas cannot be productive. So this creates an obvious issue with only rewarding that productive science. We have no soil. This soil of ideas, in this case, but also in the real world, our soil is also having some issues. So this leads to the conclusion that everybody has value in their brain. Even the ideas which then do not become productive can in some ways become valuable because it can be the soil from which the correct valuable knowledge is created. We don't have the mechanisms today by which to capture or value knowledge efficiently and fairly. Now, I know some people in here may be concerned with the concept of everybody's knowledge has value because of this, because we live in a world of false, misleading, and bad information, or misinformation. But sadly, this is the moment and time in which we're living in. We are living in a crisis of truth. There is a problem of crisis of truth even before the advent of AI, with false knowledge created by humans and being propagated through mass media systems. This is a problem today as AI becomes more powerful and we don't even know what is real footage, what is real information. This is going to become even worse. So because of this, we need a way for individuals to prove and to value their knowledge. We need a proof of knowledge. POK is the shorthand term here. In order to create proof of knowledge, it takes 4 simple steps. Firstly, you need a knowledge graph. A knowledge graph is just a visual representation of the relations between data. This idea leads to this idea, leads to this idea. It's just a conceptual framework, a visual representation. Secondly, you need to put it on chain. If you put it on chain, everybody can see and can prove the knowledge within that graph. Now you have this large set of on-chain data. You have to find a way to efficiently parse or to process this data. So we can use AI. Once you have the AI, which is efficiently processing this large sets of data, which have been proved on-chain, you can then begin to assign scores or points or a value to this knowledge. At this line here, that's our logo. This is an incentive line. Below which you have produced the scores, you have produced the mechanism, you can start to provide incentives for this knowledge. And that's what we're doing at DeSciWorld. The effect of this proof of knowledge framework is that you have a list of different pieces of knowledge which are being assigned points. Relative to other points of knowledge, you're receiving different scores. So this piece of knowledge is being used by AI more, therefore it's got more points. And this is in relation to the relevance of the context of the data. So this is where our core infrastructure comes in. We're developing a system called knowledge engrams. The K is silent, so we can call them engrams. So knowledge is not a product, it is not a service, but it is tangible, and it can be tracked, and it can be quantified. We are using this system of engrams, or knowledge engrams, to track and to quantify the concept of knowledge. K engrams, our version, are modeled after the engram, which is a real piece of thing in your brain. I'm just going to read the definition here. An engram is a unit of cognitive information which is imprinted on a physical substance, your brain, which is theorized to be where memories are stored. This is actually a theoretical concept. The engram is supposedly lots of neurons, lots of pieces of information stored together. For the entirety of history, the engrams in your brain have been confined to your brain. If you want to communicate your ideas, you have to write them down into a book or paper, pass them to somebody else, and they read it. When they read it, it goes through their engrams, and it's a filter by which their experiences, their memories, their thoughts change the information that you have written down. This is an indirect method of knowledge transfer. So our system, you can directly share this knowledge without having to use a proxy such as writing or a book. Instead, you can give this directly to an AI, and they can use it as the source of information from which they construct their responses. You know that this AI is going to read the book and understand the meaning, and you can be confident that the whole of this knowledge is going to be transmitted without any loss or any damage or confusion. In a sense, the AI is used as a compiler for knowledge. Therefore, you have a unit of knowledge in the K engram. You can use this as a building block to place together with other K engrams to create more complex pieces of information. In a sense, the engram is a knowledge oracle. So here, back to the original flow of how to create a proof of knowledge. This circle on the left, the knowledge graph and its on-chain components is the engram, the wrapper. If you are able to determine a proof of this knowledge, you can then use it as a good for other use cases, such as embeddings or context in an AI chatbot. Or you can use it to pass to other researchers and they can plug it in to their own research. So here's an example of what an AI chatbot that utilizes engrams as context might look like. This AI chatbot is producing a response. That response is coming from the knowledge unit, which is tracked and it's on-chain. Its response is here with a hyperlink attached to it. this hyperlink directly references that piece of knowledge from which it draws its information. Now, as a user, you can see who wrote it, what they wrote, and the researcher assigns points. This AI used this particular piece of information, and it is now gaining a point for being used by the AI. Right now, OpenAI's custom GPT release, which you may have seen, confirmed our thesis that a lot of people in the future will interface with information through chatbots. The issue is, OpenAI is a misnomer. OpenAI is incredibly closed. All of the data sets, which is the main lifeblood of the AI, are confined to the OpenAI databases. They obscure the source of that data. They obscure the verifiability of that data. With this system, in an AI-driven future, all of its responses can be verified and reproduced. Thus, instead of the AI becoming the core of knowledge, humans become the core of the knowledge, the core of the collective consciousness of humanity. AIs remain the tool by which we leverage our knowledge, rather than us becoming the tool for AI to farm data from. Also in this context, groups of humans together can represent their viewpoints by combining their knowledge into a singular engram and pass this off to the AI. The AI can then be trusted to relay unyieldingly the point of view from this group of humans without adding in any additional context that is not wanted. The engram directly translates to the AI the inputs from the humans, and this, in the custom GPT future, can allow incredible reproducibility and verifiability of the data which that AI is speaking. And such, through this system of referencing and scoring and verifying, sources, on the bottom left here, are incentivized to provide better knowledge. The more hits you get, the more incentives you get. The more hits you get, the better your knowledge is. The better your knowledge is, the more likely it is that you'll get more hits. This is a self-perpetuating verifying mechanism which we hope will incentivize people to provide good knowledge. So thus we have an answer to how do we value knowledge. It's not the only answer, and we hope many other people will find answers to this question. And so to reiterate, proof of knowledge is a concept. It's a conceptual framework from which you can use these steps to build an infrastructure on top, and DeSci is building an iteration of this infrastructure. This is the full proof of knowledge stack at DeSci. Proof of knowledge is the concept from which these items sit. Science.tech is the name of our upcoming technical platform from which this operates. The engrams sit on top of the platform. Sub-DAOs are how individual research collectives organize around engrams. And at the top here, these are the goals of proof of knowledge stack: to verify, to incentivize, and to create a new reputation system. I'm just going to spend 1 minute talking about reputation here, because it's important. This is the accepted sequence of creating a reputation in education. Humans combine their knowledge and give their knowledge to the institutions, research universities, institutions, universities, etc. The knowledge goes through these institutions and is then pushed out the other side as accepted canonical knowledge. This is because we do not trust ourselves to produce good knowledge. We have to have that knowledge verified by our trusted institutions. This is a trusted system. Okay, we are trying to move to a trustless system. In the revised sequence, in which engrams are a unit of knowledge which are verified inherently, engrams can provide information to humans here, to other humans. Engrams can verify other engrams. Engrams can still interact with universities. They can interact with AI. People can still interact with AI, and such can institutions. In the revised sequence, humans are at the core of the loop. The individual who is producing knowledge is at the core of the loop. And so this is how the whole system fits together at DeSci World, which is our protocol. Proof of knowledge underlies everything we do. The technical product is built on top. And then we have our conferences, of which we had one yesterday, so if anyone was there, thank you for coming. And we have the DeSci.world platform, which is our information aggregation, our communications entity. Feel free to check out that. And the DAO sits on top, which governs the entire concept. And in the interest of time, that was an understanding of a knowledge-backed economy and our infrastructure built around it. My name is Joshua. Please follow me on Twitter if you like. Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua. Thank you for being here with us.
Thanks.
Now we have our lunch break. We have coffee as well. We will continue with the speeches at 1 p.m. According to the schedule. Thank you. See you in the afternoon.
So great, but I can send you. Do you have Telegram?